it's Dr. Pavanka, and I want to talk about a bit of an uncomfortable subject in this video. So, one of those things that is the worst part of having pets and not a very fun part of being a veterinarian or working on veterinary staff is when it comes to end of life. And it's one of those things that we don't like to talk about, so a lot of times we try to avoid it because nobody wants to think their dog's getting closer to that time or their cat's getting closer to that time. And it's just not comfortable because one, we don't like to talk about it, and two, we don't like to really think about it. So a lot of times we use things like quality of life quizzes and kind of looking and seeing generally how they're doing to make that decision of if they need to have a euthanasia scheduled or what we're looking at. I will say that for the majority of the pets who don't have a euthanasia where they pass away at home, I haven't seen very good luck of having peaceful passings. That doesn't mean that not every pet can have a peaceful passing at home, but it doesn't seem to be 100% the case. Usually I more worry about distress when they die at home. I don't see very many falling asleep and dying. That's where euthanasia comes in, because we do have the ability to give them as painless of a death as possible. And each clinic has their own way of doing it, but most of the clinics I've worked at, we usually will give them a pre-medication that usually has some type of pain medication in it. And then after they're very, very much asleep, a lot of times I don't even know that they know that they're still at the clinic anymore after that, because they're feeling really good, they have their drugs, and maybe they can still hear, but I don't know that they can. Then currently the protocol at Village Vet is we go ahead and place an IV catheter so that we don't have to poke them too many times with needles. After that, we give our euthanasia solution, which is basically a double dose of anesthesia. It's not something anybody really wants to really think of. I will say that there's a lot of controversy, in my opinion, on if people should be there or not be there. My rule of thumb is if it's going to tarnish your memory of your pet and you're going to be very upset by being there for the whole time, usually after that first sedation, they don't necessarily know you're there anymore. And I have seen pets get really worked up because they don't necessarily know why their family's upset, but they do know their family's upset. So I think it's really a case-by-case basis whether you need to be there. If you want to be there, that's wonderful, but it is something that I don't think everybody should have to do. And a lot of it goes back to how are you going to remember them? Are you going to be able to remember them through the good times, or are you going to be traumatized by those last moments? One thing I always try to warn people, and it's something that again they probably don't want to hear, is some of the things we can see is like a yelp, especially with the first medication where they're feeling the poke and they're getting that sedation. But when they actually pass away, that takes a muscle to close their eyes. Their eyes stay open. They typically can go to the bathroom because they don't have the muscle control to keep themselves from urinating or defecating, pooping. And then sometimes they'll kind of twitch a little bit, or even do that agonal, that last breath where they and that's not something that everybody's prepared for. And a lot of times, because they're so close to us, it's very hard to see that. And not every pet does that. It really is a case-by-case thing. I've had dogs that we didn't realize that they had worms before, where we saw the worms, we saw the parasites. So it's one of those things that isn't necessarily an easy thing in general, but it's very dependent on you. And a lot of times when we're getting ready for that, I try to start talking about hospice planning, because what I found with my own pets is if I have everything planned out and I know what my parameters are, a lot of times I do better. So that's typically the kind of the rundown of what euthanasia looks like. Again, the word euthanasia means a pleasant death, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give them that very last gift of peace at the end, because we don't want them suffering. We want them to have as peaceful of a passing as possible. Like I said, you can be there the whole time, or you don't have to be there the whole time. It really depends on what you can handle and what your pet needs. But from what I've seen, a lot of times after that sedation kicks in, they don't necessarily know you're there anymore. I still, if you stay, I still like to talk to them, and even if you don't stay, I'll still talk to them and tell them what a good boy or girl they are, just because on the off chance that they can hear. But I don't know that they do after that. But that's the typical euthanasia flow. I have been at clinics where we don't use catheters. I personally like the catheter just because then you have an open vein. You're not worrying about trying to get a vein, because a lot of our older dogs and cats don't have great veins. And then if you do have any questions about this, let me know, but I'm going to go ahead and make a different one that's going to be more hospice planning. This is more my what to expect when you euthanize. In my hospice planning, I'll go more over different things like last meals, bucket lists, things like that.